It's the question I'm asked more than any other. How long will it take to feel the results of energy healing? When I was going through my own healing journey and working with healers myself, I always used to ask them this question, how long will it take me to feel any results? And they always used to give me the same answer. They used to say it depends, each person is different, it's impossible to know in advance. And I got quite frustrated about that. And I was always thinking, what are they holding back? What are they not telling me? Why aren't they giving me a clear indication? And now that I'm a healer myself, I find myself giving the same answer because it's the only one that's possible. And I wanted to make this video to explain why that is a little bit more. So energy healing works by releasing blockages and imbalances in the body that will help the body to access its own healing resources and to make its own changes and to heal itself, basically. But each person has a different set of imbalances, and for each person the effects of those imbalances will be very individual depending on how their system's configured. So it could very easily be that two people come with the same issue, and for one of them they feel completely resolved very, very quickly, and for another it drags on. And it's purely because each person's personal configuration is different. So if somebody comes and asks, for example, can healing help with depression? Really the answer is no. Healing can't help with any issue. What healing can do is to release the imbalances that might be creating that issue. What healing can do is to direct the body's attention to resolve those imbalances so that it can heal itself in the particular way that each person wants to be healed. But how that will affect each person and how each person will manifest the results of that healing can vary wildly. The type of healing that we choose can also have an effect, although that's not uniform, and please take this only as a very, very broad rule of thumb that really doesn't apply in all cases. But generally something like the emotion code, which works very directly and very immediately on the emotional energies that we've trapped over the years, can have very instant effects in many cases. And I've seen people who have started a session in an enormous amount of physical pain and restricted movement and felt very different by the end of the session. I sort of saw it evolving during the session itself. Whereas something like the belief code, which works on a much deeper level, might take some time to manifest in real life, into the real world. But again, there are plenty of exceptions to this. Some people feel immediate changes after a belief code session, and others need a long time after just the emotion code. I often tell the story of when my own heart wall was released. I released my own heart wall. It was the first thing I did when I learnt the emotion code. And I'd heard all the stories of transformation, and I was expecting that I would release the last emotion and suddenly my life would be totally transformed. And I did release the last emotion and nothing changed. And I was just checking, are you sure? Are you sure there's not any more emotions? And there was nothing there. So I was quite disappointed. I thought this emotion code's not very good. It's not really working for me. But Dr. Brad, who created these modalities, he suggests that we keep a diary, actually. And when we have some energy work done, or if we're doing some very focused work on a particular issue, that we make a note in our calendar of when we had that session and what it was about. And then it might be weeks or months later that we can check back in and see what's changed. And very often, in my experience, there's a huge difference. And with my heart wall, when I checked back in, it was probably 4 or 5 months after I released the heart wall, I realized that my life was so different from what it had been at the time when I released it. You know, both in terms of how I felt, how I experienced life, the sort of things that I was doing, the ways that people were reacting to me, and the types of relationships I was having. It was all totally transformed, but it happened very gradually, very subtly, step by step. So it's almost like, you know, you're climbing a mountain and you don't realize how high you've climbed until you look down. And it was sort of a bit like that with the removal of the heart wall. In the next video, we'll be taking a more in-depth look at the differences between the different types of sessions and what we can expect from each. Another question is, when we talk about results, what sorts of results are we wanting? Sometimes the effects that people have and the experiences people have after a session are totally different from what they came to the session with. There's one guy I was working with recently who came and did some belief code sessions on abundance. He wanted more abundance in his life. And after a couple of sessions, he came back and I said, how are things with the abundance? And he said, well, there's actually been no change on the abundance. And I thought, okay, how do you feel about that? Is that disappointing? And he was like, no, it's not disappointing, because while there's been no change in the abundance, one thing has changed. What I didn't tell you about was that I've had panic attacks since I was 12 years old. I've been having them every day. And as soon as we had our first session, those panic attacks stopped. So I'm not really that concerned about the abundance anymore. I'm just so happy that the panic attacks have stopped. So it might be that either as a result of the session or perhaps as a first step in the direction of the resolution of what you want to be addressed, it might be that other things happen along the way. So in that case, would we say that there were results because they weren't the results that we were after? We don't know. So I always think it's best to come to energy healing not with an expectation that it will solve all of the problems that we want to be solved on our terms, on our timetable, but rather for us to use as a tool in our journey towards health and perfection. So I've always wished that there was a more simple and straightforward answer to that question, and I've never found one, but I hope this video has given some sort of idea about why there isn't an easy and direct answer to the question. Next time, as I said, we'll be looking at the different healing modalities, emotion code, body code, belief code, and so on. What's different between them, what we can expect from each one. So I'll see you then. And in the meantime, I'm going to leave you with some wise words that you might have heard in the late 1960s.
To improve the way you're feeling, book a session with Heartful Healing.